let's get to it, people. So there's been some talk and discussion and questions about whether or not this guy is going to run for president again. Um, it's strongly, it's hinted that he is going to run again, and I mean, of course, as a person who's a diehard blue, I'm going to vote for him again because I think that he has done a number of good things, a lot more than people realize. Now, it's funny that some people have sat there and said, name one good thing that this person has done. Name two good things, or name three, or four, or five, or 10, or 15 good things. Name 20 things that he's done, and I'll vote for him next time. I got news for you. I got 40. 40. 40 good things that he has done. Or, and some of these at least is contemplating doing or pushed to do. But there's 40 good things that state out of Joe Biden's record as president. 40. Let's get into it. One, student debt reduction. So he brought the federal student debt from 1.8 trillion to 1.6 trillion. So that means he canceled 200 billion of it. And there were also reports that there were actually more than that was canceled previously. So there, at one point it was like 25 million canceled, or at another point there was like, almost 90 billion canceled, and at another point almost 25 billion. The Supreme Court is fighting a lot of these things, but at least Joe Biden can come out of this saying, even if he loses the fight, he can say, I at least pushed for this to happen. And the Supreme Court that was stacked by the Republican president, they rejected it, which is why you should be voting Democrat in the presidential elections. That was his thing, and that's what should be his thing. So he pushed for that, and that policy of canceling the 10 to 20,000 per borrower, 20,000 with the Pell Grant, essentially helps between 40 and 45 million Americans. That's a good thing. Thank you, President Biden, for pushing that. Number two, cutting the DOJ contracts with private prisons. So here's a little bit of detail on that. Now, this was he actually did this from last year, but it wasn't talked about enough, so I'm covering it now. Biden's order terminates federal private prison contracts. Here's what that means. The president vowed to ultimately put an end to private prisons, but activists say the move isn't enough to fully address mass incarcerations. They could have a point on that. The president signed an executive Tuesday that will phase out the Department of Justice's use of private prisons. The action is part of the administration's effort to address racial inequity in the country and make good on Biden's campaign promise to Black Americans who were integral to securing his presidential win in 2020. The order directs the Justice Department to decline to renew contracts with privately operated for-profit prisons. This effort began under the Obama administration and was championed by then Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates. The policy was quickly axed by the Trump administration in 2017. What a shock. Now, scholars are taking a deeper look at the restored policy and questioning its overall impact on racial inequity. When it comes to private prisons, the impact of this order is going to be slight to none. A professor of law at the Fordham University School of Law, that's what he said. This is not about shrinking the footprint of the federal prison system. It's just about transferring people to public facilities. Biden is telling an executive agency under his control what kind of contracts they can enter. That's a core executive function on Biden's. Still, states can choose who will write contracts with, blah, blah. So, he's cutting it with the private prisons, but again, they're right. The activists are right. So there still has to be more work done to address the racial inequity when it comes to mass incarcerations. But I think that's a slight step, but there still could be more done on that. Next, he put us back into the World Health Organization, which Trump took us out of. Next, he put us back into the Paris Climate Agreement, which was also the last president took us out of that. He ended the Afghanistan war. He pulled us out of Afghanistan, and I know the process was sloppy, but there's still more than what any other president did, which was next to none. So at least we're out. He cut $1,400 stimulus checks, which was in the Inflation Reduction Act, reunited 500 migrant children with their families. He gave $15 an hour to federal workers and contractors. He passed gun reform. Now, the gun reform that he passed was a bill called Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which I have that right here. We're doing this, people. We're doing this. President Biden on Saturday signed into law the first major gun safety legislation passed by Congress in nearly 30 years. The signing comes just over a month after the mass shooting at a Texas elementary school that killed 19 children and 2 adults. That attack came 10 days after a racist mass shooting at a Buffalo, New York supermarket that killed 10 black people. The president said, "While this bill doesn't do everything I want, it does include actions I've long called for that are going to save lives. Today, we say more than enough. We say more than enough. At a time when it seems impossible to get anything done in Washington, we are doing something consequential." The legislation, which passed the House 234 to 193 Friday night following Senate approval Thursday, includes incentives for states to pass so-called red flag laws that allow groups to petition courts to remove weapons from people deemed a threat to themselves or others. In addition, the bill expands an existing law that prevents people convicted of domestic abuse from owning a gun to include dating partners rather than just spouses or former spouses. It also expands background checks on people between the ages of 18 and 21 seeking to buy a gun. I think the age limit should be expanded beyond that, but that's a start. The NRA, National Rifle Association, says it opposes the bill. Of course they do. They say this legislation can be abused to restrict lawful gun purchase and infringe upon the rights of law-abiding Americans and use federal dollars to fund gun control measures being adopted by state and local politicians. Well, hold on a second. They said infringe upon the rights of law-abiding citizens. Well, if those law-abiding citizens are doing those things so if let's say a person is a domestic abuser, as this says, then they shouldn't have the right to own a gun. You can't say, well, yeah, I abuse my spouse, but I should still own this gun. That could potentially pose a greater danger to your spouse, assuming that they're not dead. So, again, that's not infringing upon your right. If you're a gun owner and you haven't done anything criminal and you're using it for the purpose of protection, and you're not abusing anybody, then you have nothing to worry about. You're safe. So that to those people, it doesn't apply to them. He passed that. He contemplated shutting down Guantanamo Bay, which was a prison facility that was opened up by the Bush administration. It should have been closed by the Obama administration. Of course, the Trump administration did nothing with it. Biden administration officials are at least saying they're contemplating closing it. That's a start, but actually shutting it down would be even better. But the fact that they're even talking about it, I mean, that means something. And that was something that I had pushed for a long time as well. Contemplating getting us back into the Iran nuclear deal, which was essentially a thing that prevents Iran from gaining nuclear weapons. So there was something that I just saw that said he killed the deal, but Trump was the one. So he pulled us out of the deal because Obama put us in there. But I don't know if that's the end of it. Are they going to turn this around and then Biden actually does put us back in it pretty soon? I got to look more into that one. But if he is going to do that, I would say that that's a good deal to put us back there. The Inflation Reduction Act, which I've covered this in another video. The Inflation Reduction Act is... We're not done here, people. We're not done. The Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, as I've stated, this includes $265 billion for prescription drug pricing reform. This also includes $369 billion for energy security and climate change, $64 billion for Affordable Care Act extension. That was also included the $1,400 stimulus checks that went out to people. Free vaccines. It capped insulin at $35 a month, which that was another thing that's on this list that one of the Democratic senators, Warnock, had slipped in that provision, and Biden signed that to law. So now your insulin is cheaper thanks to this president and thanks to the Democratic senators and congresspeople who voted for it. The lowering of gas prices. Well, I'll put it to you like this. Everybody blamed him when the prices went up. Well, if that's the case, then I guess I can just do the exact opposite. When it goes down, I give him the credit for it, whether he had something to do with it or not. Because according to them, high gas prices and high inflation means it's the president's fault. But then that means low gas prices and low inflation means the president's credit. So, I'm seeing most of these gas prices. I've passed so many gas stations on Ford Road in Wayne County, at the corner of Van Born and all these places. A lot of gas I see right now is between it was over $4 and over $5, but now it's between $2.68 and $2.88. Most gas I see now, prices are under $3. Gas is doing so much greater right now. If it goes lower, I'll be even happier. But hey, it's under $3. That's going good so far. Grocery prices are still a little bit of a problem on the other hand, so I'll be fair about that. He gave us the PACT Act, which was a thing that allowed veterans to get access to health care. Gave us the American Rescue Plan and the COVID relief package. So what was that? That was direct payments to citizens, direct economic relief via stimulus checks of $600 for individuals making up to $75,000 a year, $1,200 for couples making up to $150,000 a year, and an extra $600 for dependent children that are under 17 years old. It would apply the similar income limits and phase out as the CARES Act, reducing payments of 5% for individuals with adjusted gross incomes of more than $75,000. Payments will be based on 2019 taxes. Expanded unemployment benefits provides $120 billion of unemployment insurance. Next, expanded healthcare coverage and lowered healthcare costs. He paid his respects to victims of mass shootings. He put Ketanji Brown on the Supreme Court, the first black woman judge on the Supreme Court. Also declared Juneteenth a national holiday. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Safeguarded access for a woman's right to choose. He put a pause on the Saudi-U.S. weapons deal, which I think that needs to be completely ended. So what that is basically is so Saudi Arabia gives the United States a whole bunch of money. We're talking millions, maybe billions of dollars. And in return, we give them weapons so that they can go commit genocide in places like Yemen. And what purpose that serves? I say absolutely none. And so Biden put a pause on that. I think it needs to end, but putting a pause on it is a start. He also threatened a thing called doing a tax on windfall profits. Now, what does that mean? So windfall profits is an unforeseen or unexpectedly large profit, especially one regarded to be excessive or unfairly obtained. I had to read it from there because I wanted to do the exact wording. So Biden is saying we should do a tax on that. Now, he threatened it. He didn't exactly do it yet, and he didn't say by how much he would do it by if he does do it. I think that's a start. I didn't even know what that was till not too long ago. Somebody had brought that up because that's another thing that's not talked about enough. He also killed al-Zawahiri, leader of al-Qaeda, been adding hundreds of thousands of jobs to the economy per month. In the last few months, he's added at least 200 to 300 jobs a month to the economy. Slowing down the drone strikes. I think that's a big one right there, although I would say that the drone strikes just need to end completely because we're doing it mercilessly and it's pointlessly we're doing it. I think there was an attack that he did in Syria, and then we also invaded Somalia, so that was bad. We need to pull out of them and just stop freaking drone striking those places. He brought home Brittany Griner. He added over 375,000 manufacturing jobs. He slipped in a provision that allows the Environmental Protection Agency to re-regulate greenhouse gas emissions. He increased pay for over 1 million construction workers. He plans on cutting homelessness by 25%. We need to get rid of all homelessness, but okay. Did a 15% corporate minimum tax rate. He invoked the Defense Production Act to increase baby formula manufacturing to ease a nationwide shortage. He pardoned marijuana convictions, plans on expanding insurance technology and fertilizer programs, and is working to protect voting rights. Now, where's the other one that I had seen? Here we go. And he also signed a thing called the CHIPS Act. The U.S. Congress passed momentous bipartisan legislation that is aimed at strengthening the nation's scientific research enterprise and spur advanced manufacturing. The bill represents a huge win for ASCE and the science and engineering community. Most of the media coverage on the bill focuses on the production of leading-edge semiconductors and investing in a STEM workforce. But when you dig deeper, you will see there is so much more to the CHIPS and Science Act than what meets the eye. Looking at the provisions encompassed in this bill, it is no understatement to say this is one of the most important pieces of science and technology legislation in a generation. Here are just a few of the highlights of how the CHIPS Act and Science Act would bolster the scientific and engineering community. Robust reauthorization of the National Science Foundation, movement towards cementing a national science and technology strategy, support for the creation of regional technology hubs, fortification of R&D in the Departments of Commerce and Energy, National and Space Administration, Aeronautics. Okay, I know I'm saying that wrong, but NASA, let's just go with that. And National Institute of Standards and Technology. As is often the case, the path to enactment was either smooth nor quick as provisions of the bill moved through Congress in many forms and shapes over the past several years. Though the final approval occurred in a flurry of pre-August break activity, its origins, especially the science provisions, stretch back decades. the bill summary of the CHIPS Act right here. It will fund $200 million to kickstart development of the domestic semiconductor workforce, which faces near-term labor shortages by leveraging activities of the National Science Foundation. It funds $2 billion for the Department of Defense and to implement the Microelectronics Commons. Funds $1.5 billion to spur movement towards open architect, software-based wireless technologies and funding innovative leap-ahead technologies in the U.S. mobile broadband market. So, and then the rest of that, it's okay. Yeah, and so, again, I just went over this list right here, of all this right here. Now, people want to sit there and tell me that Joe Biden has done absolutely nothing. Now, that's not to say that everything that he's done and said has been all good or even sufficient for that matter, because there's plenty of things that he should do before the next election, and I'll get to that in another video. I actually did another video about it, but I'm going to do another one. We have to work extra hard for 2024 because I feel enough of you aren't hearing me on this. Enough of people aren't seeing this. Enough of people don't know this. So the student debt reduction, cutting contracts with the private prisons, the DLJ, putting us back in the World Health Organization, putting us back into the Paris Climate Agreement, ending the Afghanistan war, cutting the $1,400 stimulus check. It should have been $2,000. Reuniting 500 migrant children with their families. There's 200 more that are still in process, according to one article I had seen. Pass gun reform. Contemplating shutting down Guantanamo Bay, contemplating putting us back into the Iran nuclear deal, Inflation Reduction Act, lower gas prices, fighting against price gouging, capped insulin at $35 a month, American Rescue Plan, the PACT Act, the COVID relief package, expanding healthcare coverage, lowering healthcare costs, paid his respects to victims of mass shootings, put a black woman on the Supreme Court, declared Juneteenth a national holiday, safeguarded access for a woman's right to choose, put a pause on the U.S.-Saudi weapons deal, threatened a windfall profit tax, killed al-Zawahiri, been adding hundreds of thousands of jobs to the economy per month, signed the CHIPS Act, slowed down the drone strikes, brought home Brittany Griner, added almost 400,000 manufacturing jobs, slipped in a provision to allow the EPA to re-regulate greenhouse gas emissions, increased pay for over 1 million construction workers, cut homelessness by 25%, 15% corporate minimum tax rate, expanding manufacturing to baby formula, pardoning marijuana convictions, expanding insurance technology and fertilizer programs, protecting voting rights. So these are all things that he gets the credit for. And if he runs again for re-election in 2024, I'm going to campaign for him on those things. And I hope he continues to do more good things. And so that's what I have to say. I mean, I think that there are more things that need to be done. I think that the federal minimum wage should be at least $15. I think he needs to cancel all the student debt. I think he needs to cancel all the medical debt. I think that, people argue the Green New Deal. I don't think that would be a bad idea. I think that'd be pretty all right. What else? The canceling of the debt, the Medicare for all wouldn't be a bad idea, or at least lower the Medicare age to 50 or 55. Free college, a free trade school, things of that nature. Those wouldn't be bad ideas, and that would bring his ratings up even higher. And by doing some of these things alone, his approval rating went from 33 to 48% in a month. 15% just on these things alone. Imagine how much higher his approval rating would be if he did the other things that I suggested. So people, I just want to give you that. So yeah, Joe Biden has done pretty well in my book. And if he is running for 2024, I'm ready to promote him again. So we'll see how this next election turns out. We're just going to keep going from here. So right now, it's Joe Biden 2024.